The Dr. Oba Tashaka Show. Free your mind, and the rest will follow. A show for all who are on the journey to discover the truths about their identity, history, culture, politics, spirituality, and family relationships. This is a show for the Black Freedom Movement and the Black Power generation and the hip-hop generation, including Black Lives Matter and associate activists, all of whom are seeking change. Dr. Oba Tashaka and his guests are dropping knowledge and insight from his successful organizing, research, writings, and innovative thoughts, the best of which have piped into God's mind to lift you up higher and higher. To the bosses, OGs, rappers, influencers, and those looking to evolve from the constraints of misinformation and miseducation to build a foundation for personal growth, love, and mental freedom. Check out the wisdom of the OR. Yeah, that's the original revolutionary, Oba T, who inspired 1 million black men with his rousing speech at the Million Man March, and who continues to fight, write, and speak the truth. Dr. Oba Tashaka is one of the deepest deep thinkers in the world today. A quote by Dr. Asa Hilliard. Dr. Oba Tashaka, then Bill Bradley, was the best leader organizer in the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE. An endorsement from Dr. George Wiley, Associate Director of National CORE and the best organizer blacks produced in the 1970s as the organizer of the National Welfare Rights Organization. The Dr. Oba Tashaka Show. Free your mind, and the rest will follow.
Greetings to the viewers, the ones who are on time. And I predicted that Kamari, you'd be on this one, knowing where your mind's at. Brother Lao Tzu, Brother Kamari, Sister Robin, and Brother Ogawa, the early risers, or at least the early ones to show up on this chat. Greetings. We have another show for you. Thursday, I came up with this one. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and then I said, okay, it's this one. But before getting into that, for the benefit of new viewers that will be coming on and viewing the show, I just want to note how this show works. So when you click into the show, the first thing you're going to click into is a thing that says playlist. And that's something that's been put up to introduce you to different categories of the show. So you'll see a playlist, for example, that says African womanhood. That's actually a discussion on African manhood and African womanhood, which means Black as well as, Blacks in the U.S., African Americans and Africans. Or you'll see another one entitled Revitalizing Black Communities, or another on the TWA, another on the ANU. So these are introductions to different subjects that are covered on this show. And this show has a lot of different categories. That is, we do series of things. And so the show is like a chapter in a book. And these are openings to chapters. And I just got a notice from a brother who says that he's been following me for a number of years. And so he's been binge watching these different shows. It kind of sounds like what Ogawa was telling me a couple of years ago. So whether you binge watch or you are just getting acquainted with the show, then that's the first thing. go look at the playlist. But then when you click on to videos, category called videos, then you're going to get all the shows that we've produced on this show, which is over 90. And so my recommendation for people who are doing that is look at series. In other words, look at how they're listed. And so if you do the Twa, there's a 5-part series in there. So look at each one, because this is on history, and this is history normally not covered because the Twa have been left out of history, or the Anu, ancient Kemet, or properly called Egypt. It's generally the dynastic history that's covered from 3200 or 3300 BC, but we're going back to the beginning, 10,000 BC. And all of this has a foundation for self-knowledge, so you know who you are. It's also a building block for some of the things we'll be doing on this show for leadership training. And for some of you who have families and stuff, it's a teaching thing that you can teach your children. And then for a lot of you young people that are watching, this is good for you to have in your life so you can negotiate life better. And for our elders, this is additional wisdom that you can use. So one of the key purposes of this show is to have an intergenerational conversation, and that is to also pass stuff on to the younger generation. And we'll have younger people on the show who will be doing their sharing as well. So that's a key purpose of this show, is to empower you so that you can be strong in your life. That's a real purpose here. Again, to note something, the show is growing. This week, we've tripled our viewership from 2 weeks ago. The average 2 weeks ago was about 300 views to a Saturday, and then we pick up more views throughout the month. But we've got 1,000 views, actually 1,150 views of this show, both on Facebook and YouTube. And in fact, Facebook has generated more numbers, though YouTube, we have this strong following of subscribers. And we encourage people on Facebook to also click into the follower thing, because that's important in Facebook. I got 4,700 Facebook friends. So Brother Ugawa's work shows up clearly on the analytics, the stuff he's done on Twitter, that's showing up real strong. And it's showing up this week as producing the largest number of viewers. So right on, Brother Ugawa. And he's done a few other things as well, hooking me up on other shows and stuff like that. We have Sister Erica Bird that has just joined this group. And Sister Erica is a leader of Caress Unity Church in a spiritual center in Los Angeles. She just lost her beautiful husband. They've been partners in running that spiritual center. And so it's a real honor to have you on, Sister Erica. And we've interacted a lot over the years through ASCAT, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization. And in fact, one of the DVDs that you can buy and download and put into your iPhone is entitled Mastering the Masters. Sister Erica Bird introduced me at that particular Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization conference. Unfortunately, her introduction doesn't show up in the DVD. I don't know why, but she did the introduction. Plus, she's a sister Leo. So right on. Very good to see you. Last week's show, and Brother Ed Donaldson, good to see you. Last week's show introduced to you a jewel of African American culture. We have many jewels, and these are jewels that come out of Africa, but these jewels have been readapted in the culture of Africans in America. And this is one of the deepest jewels in African culture, and that's their mastery system. The Per Ankh House of Life system, which is the highest educational system of ancient Kemet, drew from this mastery system. This mastery system did not originate in Kemet. It originated in Inner Africa through the secret societies. And the book I'm finishing now on Seba covers that, drawing heavily on the Dogon mastery system, the Kemetic one, and the African American one. And so if you see a Black master in this country, in any domain, because this covers all domains, a John Henry Clark, they came through this. A George Washington Carver, they came through this. An Ella Baker, they came through this. A Chris Rock, they came through this. Or, even though his life was raggedy, it was not his fault, Mike Tyson. He became a master boxer by mastering boxers. And when he was at the top of his prime, he was quite a master. And of course, Muhammad Ali, whose great master was considered to be the greatest boxer in the history of boxing, Sugar Ray Robinson. The masters say that. I don't. I'm not a master on boxing. But the fact that he suited his style after him tells you something. You hear me? So this beats Harvard, Yale, and all the rest of them. And John Henry Clark said he favored this system of mastery because you didn't have to unlearn anything. When you go through the Western system, they're not training you to be masters. They're training you on remote control so that you can become a remote control automatic pilot, 00 soul Negro, good at repeating stuff, quoting people, you know what I mean? And serving their interests. And when I discovered that I had been put on that system, I dropped it. So I've come up under these systems, the sixfold stages to mental freedom, that freed my mind in the course of the Black Freedom Movement. Freed Malcolm, freed Amilcar Cabral, freed a whole lot of others. And then I came up under this mastering the masters system. And that's my secret. And that's John Henry Clark's. That's a whole bunch of folks. So last week's show was about getting into the top, just an introduction of this mastery apprenticeship system. It's also the cornerstone of the Per Ankh Amilcar Cabral Ella Baker Leadership Institute that I have operating. And the background material that you're getting on this show in terms of history and stuff is preparing you for some stuff. And the formal kickoff of this will be with the first class, which will be a webinar going on for a year, twice a month, on the sixfold stages to mental freedom. This is the ultimate healing system, since a lot of people need to be healed. And it's the free the mind system. Without this, you wouldn't have had a Malcolm X. You hear me? So what was covered last week is a working system for this show, along with the sixfold stages to mental freedom. Last week's show was entitled, and I'm just summarizing this to get into this show because these two are linked. Last week's show was entitled, The Dogon and African American Mastery Systems Are the Same. This is a big breakthrough I've made. This is an innovative breakthrough because one of my specialties is New African culture, African American culture. Most of our African-centered scholars don't study African American culture. Big mistake. Because how can you apply the past if you don't apply it to the present? But more important, some of us in the 60s operated on the assumption, and I'm talking about scholars, that we didn't have a culture. A lot of our leaders did. The Nation of Islam did. Malcolm X often said it, but his thoughts indicated some contrary ideas as well, because his street life and his family life, once he woke up, the Garvey life, had linked him up to something else. So, but he'd say it, but then it was only half said, because he was also deep into that world, and especially when he underwent an awakening and caught up to his brothers and sisters that didn't fall asleep like him. You know what I mean? There were reasons why he fell asleep. So last week's show, entitled Dogon and African American Mastery Systems Are the Same, was an introduction to this system. And I made the point that it also links up to the sixfold stages to mental freedom. Generally, when a person begins the path of freeing their mind, it's a natural thing to want to be the best. But I pointed out, not everybody wants to be the best at what they do. So if you're not one of those, the master and the master system ain't going to be for you. Because please believe me, I can tell you the key thing to this one is hard work. That'll scare a lot of people away. But then if you go up against an opponent that's a master and you're a chump, you're beaten before you get started. So you better not be leading a movement and be a chump. And we've had plenty of leaders like that and have some of them now. You know what I mean? So my forthcoming book on Seba, and I'm still working on the exact title. I have some working titles, and I picked an artist. It's going to be beautiful. A brother named Larry Crow, who did the cover for my books, The Art of Leadership, Volume 1, and The Art of Leadership, Volume 2. He did these covers. He did these in pencil, and I'm asking him to do the cover for the Seba book in oil, because I prefer oil. My covers end up being art that I hang at my house. My house is like an art gallery, you know what I mean? Our house, me and my wife's. So my forthcoming book on Seba is going into depth on how the Seba system works, which is your teaching system. We have to throw out the Western one. And how the mastery system works. These are two different ones, because if you're teaching a child the fundamentals of stuff, or you are yourself learning whatever it is through the instructional method, that's not the same as the mastery method. And so this book covers sixfold stages to mental freedom, the Seba system of education, but it places a special focus on the mastering the master's system. And I examined 6 masters: Miss Ella Baker, Professor John Henry Clark, John Coltrane, Amilcar Cabral, Dr. Theophilo Benga, and I have to include myself, because if you haven't mastered this, you can't not explain it. I interviewed Dr. Obenga, I pointed this out before, for 18 hours about 25 years ago on the masters in his life. If you saw the show where we had a conversation last year, and as I pointed out last week, I talked to him last week, and he's going to be coming on the end of the year. So I was able to examine the masters in his life. And John Henry Clark, the last 8 months of his life, I interviewed him on the masters in his life, the last interview being conducted after an ASCAC conference in New York in 1998, where I also found out that Obenga was looking for a job, and I was in charge of the hiring committee. I just stepped down as chair 2 years ago, Black Studies, and so we brought him in at the same time. But I interviewed John at his wife's house, and that was about a 3 to 4 hour interview on the Boloso masters in his life. That is the creative masters. And he called that his mature period. So what I covered on the top last week is going to be covered in depth. And I've done a lot of work on this. It's been a 25-year project. So this mastery system is the greatest mastery system in the world, and it has produced the masters of our race who beat all other masters on the planet. Just think about, because I give them all the time, but George Washington Carver, the greatest scientist on the planet in the 20th century, an ex-slave. Yeah. The slavery did all this wiping out of our culture, which is pure bull. They tried to, and we reformed it. How is it that we hold on to the core, fundamental core elements, the heaviest core elements? Because, you know, when you get into the master system, and then also the educational system, which I'm putting forward a method of teaching that replaces the Western system. But when you get into the master system, that is at the highest realm of how you reproduce your culture. And you got it at a level that nobody can touch. And yet we got people running around here talking about they took our culture from slavery. We don't have anything, running around the world talking that nonsense, because you can't take a people's culture unless you wipe them out. That's the only way you eliminate culture. Culture can be changed, and culture is constantly undergoing transformation. But the key thing about this mastering the master system is it's a system that we brought from Africa and was carried in the Caribbean, South America, and the United States. In the Caribbean and South America, it could continue on as it was in Africa. Here, it was attacked. And so we had to do a very creative act of recreating it. So the Dogon mastery system that this system is based on, but it's not solely based on it. I just use that because it's the best one for explaining how the system works, because the mastery systems of Africa are pretty much the same, because Africa has a cultural unity. So the mastery system of the Yoruba is pretty much the same as the Dogon, pretty much the same as the Asante and many others. But using the Dogon mastery system, it's an expression of the Dogon ethos, E-T-H-O-S. Ethos is what distinguishes a people from other people in the world. It's the distinguishing quality. Now, there are many qualities. My wife and I often talk about this. If you see a continental African, you can tell from his face that he ain't from here. He looks just like a Black person here, but the culture's in the face. The culture's in the way the mouth is set, because they've often been speaking their own traditional language, but there's a whole worldview that shapes them. Similarly, if someone's fallen in the mud, you can see the ethos of someone who's become slimy. It's in their face. It's in their eyes. I'm an organizer. But women are real good at this. They pick this up in a minute, especially sisters. But if you got any kind of sensitivity as a brother, you pick it up too. There's certain people, they got a certain look. They ain't coming in my house. You know what I mean? You ain't getting close to me. No way. I can see it. Change is a different story. So the Dogon mastery system is an expression of the Dogon ethos of what makes them special in the world, that distinguishes them from other people. That includes other African people. All Africans don't have the same ethos, by the way. Have a similar culture, but ethos, that's special to how a people really shape their culture in a unique way. And Africans have a habit of doing that, and the African American especially. So the Dogon people have an ethos that is cosmic based. Cosmic. In other words, their ethos is tied to their relationship to the cosmos. You say all African people. Yeah, not in the way the Dogon do, okay? They are a people who say that their males are descended from the star Sirius B, that they say is the source of the origin of this universe. And we're seeing now with this new camera that they've got taking pictures of stellar space that there are many universes, billions of them. Billions. Can you imagine? You hear me? And so they say that their males come from Sirius B. This does not mean on a spaceship. It just is spiritually, meaning their spiritual origin is from the star Sirius B, from which the Big Bang occurs, according to them. And astrophysics supports them that the Big Bang, which gives birth to the cosmos, comes from the infinitely small. Now, was it Sirius B? Maybe. But the key point is they're correct in identifying the source. Whether that's the exact source, probably. But if it's not, it's another dwarf star, but it may well be Sirius B. And then they say women are descended from the companion star that Western astronomers can't be sure exists, Eminya. The Dogon have known about this star system for 700-800 years, as far as we know, thousands probably. And the West only discovered it in the early part of the 20th century. So being rooted in the cosmos, therefore, Dogon thought is defined by them as deep knowledge. Deep knowledge. That's their term for philosophy. My master, Jacob Carruthers, Jake from Chicago, described this as deep thought. He didn't like the term philosophy, but he had to agree we gave birth to it. And he may well have got this from the Dogon and turned it into deep thought, because his wife said, talked to her recently, she said that Jake studied the Dogon. So that may well be the source. Otherwise, it's a big coincidence. But either case, you can't get too much deeper than putting your thought into the origins of the cosmos. Hello. Now, so their ethos is cosmic, stellar. And some of y'all know I'm an amateur astronomer, but I'm not much of an astronomer. I'm an astrologer, practicing since '69. Best system of character analysis on the planet. Now, I know Sister Erica Bird has no problem with that. She comes out of a spirit-oriented system, but a lot of the Afrocentric people do, because you've been brainwashed by this white boy who, in the Catholic Church, because they know that if people understand their cosmic connection and understand they're the miniature cosmos and the larger, see, you say that, but you ain't got no system for explaining that, other than the fact that we're made up of stellar dust and some other stuff, but you ain't got a system. This is God's system. And by the way, as I pointed out in a previous show on this, my sister and I did 3 shows on astrology. The Kemites gave birth to it, according to Herodotus. We quote Herodotus on everything else, that the Kemites were black and so forth, but we don't quote him on that. And I know I'm not going to name the names, but one of my great masters, if you said astrology, he'd go through the ceiling. Only time I saw intolerance, I had to laugh to myself. And he knew I was an astrologer too. So I know I've learned through my life crisis not to say things when it's going to upset people and do no good. I like to upset people when I'm coming up with new stuff. You know what I mean? But it's for a purpose, to shake them up. I'm revolutionary. So, you can consider the new stuff coming on. You can change maybe. But when I'm dealing with a great master, or anybody that I know ain't going to be able to take the message, I'm not pushing it on them. You know what I mean? So I just had to sit back when the word came up from another master, and this one went off. And so I knew it. You know what I mean? So a lot of you got a bias to this, and you're missing something, because you are miniature stellar universe. And how those stars interact, and particularly the ones on this earth plane interact in you, is definitive of certain gifts, certain strengths, and certain weaknesses. And I didn't believe it either until my sister's godmother, who happened to be Mexican American, Addie, did a spot chart. And that's a chart that you can do in about 5 minutes. When I do a person's chart, it's 30 hours to do their chart, to do how, because astrology is about the energy interactions between planets. And some people have the gift of doing this for children. I don't. That's a special training. And then I'm a political astrologer. So I look at how nations, how their personalities are shaped. So the Dogon are into the astrophysics. They're into the astronomy. And of course, they're practicing astrology. Now, the African in America coming up under this rough, tough system, and that's true of the African in the Western Hemisphere, we didn't have no time for us to be studying the stars, except where's that North Star? When we get out of here, what star do we follow? That's the North Star. You know what I mean? So generally, our ethos is not going to be grounded in astrophysics. So I think you should study it. You know, that ain't our ethos. There's a reason for it. Now, we have some real bad people that are into that. If you notice, the one that managed this big telescope that's giving you all this beauty from outer space, he's a brother. He's a mathematician and an engineer. And he's the one that made this project move. You hear me? Huh? But Brother Benjamin Banneker knew about Sirius B. And this is in the 18th century. He had a better almanac than Thomas Jefferson. You know? And the white boy didn't learn about Sirius B until the early part of the 20th century. So it is very likely that his relative Banneker, and that's is a Dogon name, taught him that. But I'm not here to say that the ethos of the African American is astrophysics. You know it ain't, and I'm not about to say it. So even though the stars played an important part in our lives, especially in getting our freedom, you know what I mean? So the New African, and I'm using this because this Master in the Master system is a window into how the culture was formed. It's the microcosm of something bigger in the culture, but it's a big part of it. And the fact that we haven't focused on it is telling you something about our own attitudes, even though some of us are going through it, even though it's central in our cultural lives. So what happens in the New African, what I call New African, because that's us taking principles from Africa, rearranging them, and coming up with a new African culture you call African American. It's not centered around astrophysics. It is the result of the battle we had to wage on the plantation when the effort was made to wipe our culture out. They didn't make that effort in the Caribbean. Why? We outnumbered them, 90, 95, 98% on those islands. So they couldn't do a thing, like I pointed out last week, outlaw the drum, but they couldn't outlaw most of the culture. It just persisted, you know what I mean? Dropped in there and continued with European influences, on the side or whatever, but it's predominantly African. But the African in America, in reacting to the effort to destroy our culture, and culture is your way of life and designed for living. You can't live without it. It's like food. It's like water. It's nourishment to your soul. And so what we did is we went inside our souls and inside ourselves, and we drew up the deep truths of Africa, which first generation carried directly. and then subsequent generations drew on and built upon. And as we did this, we drew up central principles that are key in African culture, such as spirit, such as extended family, such as the centrality of elders in our life, such as the importance of truth. There's a whole bunch of things that represent core principles in our culture. And so in spite of what you've been told and some of you believe, slavery didn't destroy our culture. We recreated it here with new elements necessary for our survival here. And of course, with the penetration of foreign elements that are negative that we have to, remove from our presence. So it is the very act that we carried out to recreate a culture here that defines our ethos. I was talking to a good friend of mine who will be on this show next month. We're going to do a month on New African and African American culture. His name is John Handy. And John Handy is a great jazz saxophonist, tenor saxophonist. He sold 1 million records, his record, Hard Work. And he was a member of CORE. He was a leader in CORE on the executive committee and got arrested a number of times. And so we talk a lot. He lives not far from me. And he was making the point that it seems that everything we do as a people, it involves creativity. And so I went into this point I'm making right now, and he agreed. And see, that's the creative apex of the culture, jazz, at least the creative jazz musicians. It's the high point. We have an art form that we created in enslavement, not jazz, it was spiritual blues, out of which everything else flows. And we're running around here. I have a friend, Dengani, who will be honoring the last 2 weeks of next month. He passed away recently. He was chair of the education committee of San Francisco CORE. He was a leader in the Black Arts movement, and he was chair of our education committee. And one of the most brilliant people I've ever known. He wrote the introduction of my book on the political legacy of Malcolm X. He helped me out with a lot of things and went on to found the Journal of Black Poetry, the premier journal for the Black Arts movement. And so I was writing up a statement for him because we're going to be honoring him in the community. And we're doing a film that we'll be showing on the 20th and the 27th of this month, honoring him. And so I wrote, I think it was a 7-page article. Brother Marvin X, who's a leading Black arts poet, had asked me to write this, and he's part of the planning committee to plan a community memorial for him. So I was going back reading his journal of Black poetries. And Amiri Baraka was chief assistant editor to him, along with Marvin X and another brother. And so there's a piece where he's reviewing Harold Cruz's book, Crisis of the Negro in Election. The book had just come out. And Dengani was a very dry person, not emotional. And whenever he made a comment, you better listen, he was quiet. And so he starts this by saying, this is a good book. Now, that's an understatement. It turns out to be a classic. Crisis of the Negro Intellectual. If you haven't read it, you better read it. And he makes this comment. He made a bunch of comments on the culture, but this is the main comment he made. How could a people with a garbage can culture convince us that we didn't have one? Good question. Garbage can? What do you mean by that? Their religion, it's not theirs. It comes from the Jews. It's Hebrew based. Their culture is based on violence and control, savagery and barbarism. And since the Anglo-Saxon Protestant gave birth to this country, it is birthed in savagery and barbarism. And so how could a savage and barbaric culture convince you of anything other than that it needs to be put back in the garbage can, particularly when it comes to our heads? So I'm saying that to say that The biggest weakness that Black folks have in this country is that we underestimate our own strengths. And most of us, this whole idea that we have an apprenticeship system that comes from Africa is news to us, but it's been followed all over the place in this country by Black folks. It's been weakened by peer groups and things like that have hit the youth recently, but the fact is it's still strong. And if you want to be good at what you do, you had better be finding you a master that you can draw from, or masters. So in recreating our culture, we went inside our souls and did an act of recreation. So what is our ethos? Our ethos is creativity. The whole world knows it. So what distinguishes us from other people in the world? It's creativity. One of my faculty members at San Francisco State, who kind of brainwashed, continental African, we're sitting at a holiday dinner, faculty at San Francisco State years ago, and he's the last person I expect to say this. He said, the African in America is the most innovative and creative African on the planet. I would add, people on the planet. And most of you don't even know it. It is your biggest weapon in life, your creativity. It's what makes you beautiful to the world. That's why your culture is the popular culture of the world. And you think of culture only as music. That is your art form. Let's get precise. We created an art form in enslavement. What other people created an art form? The African and the Caribbean didn't have to. They continued the African art form. We created a new African art form in the form of the spiritual blues. And the whole art form springs from that. Those contradictory sounds that are sad and somber and joyful at the same time. Those sounds that have to put a smile on God's light. Because I pointed this out before, as Fool's Crow, the great holy man of the Lakota people, said, God is a sucker for music. You hear me? What that means is God's vibratory force, infinite force, outside of space and outside of time. What is music? Vibratory force. And when it's beautiful, then it's vibrating to God's level. That's what Coltrane did with the Love Supreme. And on the political level, that's what Malcolm was doing with his thought. He was trying to bring beauty into the world as Ella Baker was. You hear me? I didn't cover Malcolm in my book because people know Malcolm. I brought out some masters whose development you don't know. So the point of last week's show was to get you to see that in the recreation of culture here, we adapted it and reconfigured it to suit our needs. And so every time we go to, there's a blues song that says, I'm going through a turning point in my life. Beautiful song. Every time we hit a turn in the road as a people, and individually, a fork in the road in our individual lives, and we reach this turning point, we have to go inside of ourselves and create something new. So if you look at our political movements, and today I'm going to be talking about, the topic is strategy, the ultimate art, the basis for victory in the Black liberation movement. And some of you think we haven't had any. And that's the other thing. You don't know a victory when you see one, most of you. Y'all kicked Trump's behind, and where was one national celebration? And I hear people moaning and groaning about Black Lives Matter this and Black Lives Matter that, because you got the same problem with Black Lives Matter, except for a few things that you had with the Black freedom movement. They're nonviolent. Of course, they have some sexual things that some Blacks have issues with. But the fact of the matter is that movement, along with the bungling of COVID, knocked Trump out of office. You should have been celebrating from the rooftops. How many of you did? And when I talk about it on the show, I don't even get a response because you don't know Very often, some of you do, but I'm saying most of our people can't see a victory when it's staring them in the face. Now, if Hollywood did a movie like Roots, you'd all be flooding to it. The white boy got to tell you something. It's your victory. You should know. You hear me? So every time we've reached a turning point in our life, what do? We go inside of ourselves and draw on that creativity, which we call improvisation or innovation, which is the highest level. Only 2% of us get to that level. That's where you create new systems and new schools. And so we go inside of ourselves, and what do? Just as in the music, we create the spiritual blues. We create the blues. We create jazz. We create gospel blues. We create rhythm and blues, We create funk and we create hip hop. That's on the musical scale, but we often reduce our culture just to music and entertainment. And that's the high point when it's high, because some of that ain't high, if you know what I mean. But when we reach this turning point in our life, what do? We create a UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association, on the spot. We create a Montgomery bus boycott, as Martin Luther King said, with discipline and freedom. And King didn't get his propers, especially with the revolutionary blacks who put him down, because they were nonviolent. He was up there in the cave with the real caveman, taking on a system that if you just black and look wrong, you get lynched, or if you look right. And they wrestled that system to the ground. They used jujitsu and you didn't see it. I'm an ex-Marine. I'm a martial artist. I wasn't then, but I'm a warrior. So was he. But I saw it. That Montgomery bus boycott is what started to open my eyes up. Big victory. 97% of black people standing up. When standing up and looking the wrong way gets you killed. And we run around here saying, we can't do that. You've been turning the other cheek for I don't know how long on that job, skinning and grinning and all the rest of that stuff, and then coming home and getting angry with your wife or your husband because you couldn't let your frustration out on the job, but people are standing up for you, and some of you don't even see what's going on. You know what I mean? So at each turning point, we've gone into ourselves and our souls and created something new. So how did hip hop come out? Bronx is burning. These brothers come up with an art form. Beautiful. They ain't got no music in the schools. They ain't got no musical instruments. So what did they do? Word up. And they come up with all this other stuff. You know what I mean? The artists and everything else, aerosol art, which is what they really call it. And some of these aerosol artists are master artists. You hear me? So at every turning point, we come up with something new, something unpredictable. We go inside our souls. You hear me? And we're able to produce victories as a result of that. That is really the source of how we use strategy as an ultimate art. So our creativity has been the basis for the victories we've achieved in the Black freedom movement, the Black power movement, the Pan-Africanist, Afrocentric, and Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, they got a movement in all 50 states of the United States and 50 countries, and you're not going to acknowledge that. And some of us, I sit in a barbershop and some of these Negroes asking, these are young Negroes asking, well, do you think Biden's better than Trump? Well, you got to be asking a dumbass question like that. Yeah, Biden ain't what you want, but if you had Trump in a second term, you got crypto fascism full blown. And if he gets in there again, all of you that got Social Security, think about the people that don't, and think about the clampdown that's going to come. And that is on the rise. And you better understand your situation. You better draw from your creative bag to produce some changes. You hear me? Some real changes. So my topic for today, strategy, the ultimate art, the basis for victory in the Black liberation movement. Personally, for those of you who are new, let me introduce myself, but those of you that know me, you already know this. And we all have qualities. So these are mine because the topic, you're going to see why I'm dealing with this. I'm a spirit, scholar, warrior. That's what I am. Those three things. Dr. Obenga, Dr. Theophil Obenga, the greatest scholar on dynastic Kemet in the world, and one of the greatest historians in the world, and a linguist and many other things. He stayed at my house for 4 months in 1998. And then afterwards, he shifted to the university for housing. So he's getting out of the car, and he looks at me because I pointed out before, this room where I'm doing the show is my study. Behind me is a desk, which I use for writing when I'm doing legal tablets. That's research on books and stuff. And so he was using that. He had a typewriter. Obenga didn't use a computer. He's got one now at his home in Congo Brazzaville that's operated by someone else. So I got to see him and his discipline. He got to see me. He was working on his book on the pharaohs. I'm working on the book that I'm finishing now on Seven. And so he's getting out of the car and he looks up to me and he says, "Tshaka." And I said, "What?" Obenga's very observant. And by the way, he's a real good critic. And he's not a critic, but he's real good at it because he's a philosopher. He hits a nail on the head and it's got no ego in it. And if he says something you want to hear, you feel good. And if he says something you don't want to hear, too bad. He's not into that. He's just being accurate. So he had observed me and he said, "Shaka." And I said, "Yeah, Obenga." He says, "Shaka, you a revolutionary." And then he goes on and says, "Among the African-centered scholars," and then he put a lot of emphasis on this, "you the only one, the only one." It's like, it's kind of like, yeah, well, first of all, you're telling me anything I already didn't know, but that he saw it, it shows me that he's observant because I wasn't up here spouting off stuff, but he knows from my analysis pretty much what I think of the system, and he don't think too highly of it either. If you watch that conversation we had last year. So that's true. So I'm Oba, your original revolutionary. That's me. And revolutionary, some people say, what does that mean? Well, in the Western sense, it means taking an oppressive system, tearing it down, and creating something new. In traditional Africa, in ancient Kemet, it meant going back to the first occasion. Septepi, they called it. Septepy, because the first occasion was the most just period. Now, for the Kemites, that's the noon, the watery mass. That's the noon, out of which all life comes. But if you're going to be historically correct, the first occasion is when God's first people populated this planet Earth. And so for me, Oba, the original revolutionary, I've studied Marx and all the rest of them. And I don't put down the Marxists because that's the system's game to put down anything left of right, you know? I don't put them down, but I ain't one of them. Why? Because revolutionary to me means drawing from the most just systems that our people have created over a couple of 100,000 years. And people who watch this show know I'm grounded in the Twa. Twa's been left out of history. That is the Anu, who are the world's first people. So revolutionary to me means drawing on time-tested systems that are just. And here's the other thing for me. Western systems leave the family out. Western systems leave spirituality out. Western systems leave the transformation of the people out. It's material oriented. Now, the good side is they're talking about under Marxism, equal distribution of the wealth. But they don't have a real good formulation for how you equally distribute power. And when you get into the world, where is power? Or where should it be? among males and females. So the twin lineal model that you've seen me pushing, that's at the core of it. So you want to know what it means to be an original revolutionary for me? It's drawing from the best of our past and then adapting it, translating it, and transforming it in the present, being creative the way our people are. So that's what it means for me, to create societies free of hunger, free of poverty, free of oppression, free of abuse of children, free of abuse of women, free of jails, free of bloody violence, and free of hatred. And I'm realistic about it. I know it can happen. Some of our people are so jaded by either the thought that, and the teachings that you can't change that. The world's always been like that. No, it hasn't. For most of the time, it's been like what I just described. This is a brief intermission. We got to go back to black, or the best of it, and the best of whatever anyone else has got to offer. So that is my thing. Now, in providing some insights into the topic, strategy, the ultimate art, the basis for victory in the Black liberation movement, I'm drawn from two major sources. Revolutionary theory. I said to people, I'm not into theory. I'm not into theory that's a guess, but theory that's based on practice, stuff that works, I am. And so I'm drawing from revolutionary experience, my own, my people, and the world's. Whatever has worked in a way that can produce justice and power for people, and in this case, for our people. So that is like the foundation of where I'm going when I'm drawn from this idea of strategy as the ultimate art. Then people already know, and I won't be getting into this in this show, but as I've matured and grown, my best stuff, including best strategy, comes from God's beautiful light. And when you employ that in any work you're doing, whether it's personal, whether it's transforming yourself, or rebuilding families or communities or nations, that's the best stuff. And so my book, The Integration Trap, Generation Gap Caused by a Choice Between Two Cultures, draws from the beautiful light of God and adapts strategies to rebuilding families and communities since the post-68 period. So I'm going to be focusing heavily on some victories we've had in the past, but I'm focused on the present too. And God gave me the light that defined the problem that our people have faced since 68 to now in this country and globally. And it is the key to the solution. And that comes under a category that I've covered in previous shows called the choice between two cultures. Those are God's words that came through me. And organizers and everything else who are dealing with community organizing today, scholars and everything else, they say, that's absolutely right. Yeah, because it came from God. Please believe me. So if you're fortunate enough to get a strategy from God, the way Sitting Bull did, by the way, his strategy to defeat Custer came from a dream. And he was a great Lakota healer, as well as a warrior of the Lakota people. That gave him the victory of Little Bighorn. Most of us aren't privileged to pipe into that. It's only when God's kind enough to share that with us that we get that light. So good luck on that one. I won't be stressing that today. So as a human being, I've made my share of mistakes in life. We're perfect. We're not perfect. One viewer of this show said, in certain lessons that I've had to learn, I was a slow learner. Sister Erica Bird, she said that to me about 20 years ago. That was around the male-female thing. She's right, because while other people may have certain things down, they may have the answer, others don't, and it just takes a time to learn. That took me time to learn. So I was a slow learner, but I did internalize the lesson. So I've made mistakes in life. I got my weaknesses like everybody else. However, I want to make this point because I'm talking about strategy here. That's a subject for today. When it comes to political battles and war, politics has been defined by some as war without bloodshed, and war has been defined as politics with bloodshed. That was Mao Zedong's definition, but he was using a guy named Clausewitz on war, and he added his stuff. So I don't follow Mao or anything. I'm not into Chinese thought, though that's one of my specialties. I'm just simply saying that's a pretty good, accurate definition. Though sometimes struggles that do not involve bloody wars can still be bloody. So don't think that because it's political, you're getting away from not getting some lumps, or your enemy is. But largely, that's the distinction. So when it comes to political battles, a form of warfare, I've been involved in battles for 62 years. That's the warrior part of me. I'm like a cat. That's one of my most enjoyable activities. Not so much the battle, it's the strategy for the battle. And so in these 62 years, I fought battles on the political sphere, economic sphere, educational sphere, institutional sphere, cultural front, and I've had 3 assassination attempts run on me through the FBI, CIA, and including not just COINTELPRO, but low-intensity operations. So if you read The Art of Leadership, Volume 2, I'm the first among the Black activists to explore what that is. Most of us know counterintelligence program. You know, it's brutal and bloody. You know, they assassinate you, they attack your character, they imprison you, they force you into exile, they take your jobs away from you. You know, they do a whole bunch of different stuff, and they've tried most of that on me. But the fact, that's the brutal stuff. But this low intensity, that's sophisticated stuff. And they ran that on my organization, Pan-African People's Organization, that still operates today because I had trained myself in it. I had been in the UK. I've mentioned this on some show before. Most people here haven't heard it. The United Kingdom. I've worked organizing in the United Kingdom since 1974. And I picked up a book on low intensity and peacekeeping operations that laid out the strategy for low intensity operations. I studied it and then, you know, developed an understanding of it. So when they sent in a master agent on me, I spotted them right away. With low intensity, if you don't catch them right away, you're finished. Your organization's over. It's gone. Poof. Huh? To me, everything's a strategy. And they made some mistakes in how they trained this guy. They overtrained him. That was a big mistake. And then they tried to appeal to my ego. My ego's under control. That's why I'm alive. You hear me? One of the things that will get you done in right now is that ego. Brother Dreamchild is saying they're using low intensity operations quite a bit right now against our contemporary activists. That's true. They are. And they need to know how it works and how they counter it, because they're going to come always after your weaknesses. So you got to really deal with that. You have to know how it works. And when they hit you with low intensity, the community is not going to know what's happening. And if you're not trained in it, you won't either. You know, so again, it's going to take strategy to defeat that. So my point is, my basis for this discussion is 62 years of experience on a whole lot of levels. The key thing about me is I've never lost a battle. So I started this by saying I've made a lot of mistakes in life. In strategy, I haven't. Huh? In strategy, I haven't. And I have 3 basic rules that account for this, but this isn't the real deal. This is just the surface. It's the 3 W's. My wife was asking me earlier this week, what's the 3 W's? This is my philosophy, baby. Winning, winning, and winning. That's the philosophy. You are what you think. And if you think you're going to lose, chances are you are prepared for failure. It doesn't mean you're going to win just because you think you're going to win. You better have the gifts to win. You better possess the arts to win. So this is real key. So what I'm going to share with you comes from my experience, but also the experience of others in successful strategies for Black liberation. Now I want to make this point. My father was a fighter. Some of your relatives have been fighters. My father came up in the 20s and the 30s and so forth. And he worked on a plantation in Orange, Texas, when he was 12 years old and younger, and beat the owner's son. I've talked about this in some previous show. My father was a fighter against racism, against oppression. He taught himself how to read, didn't have a year of school. He didn't have any time to. He raised himself from the age of 12 when he left the so-called plantation and took care of himself. So his weapons were his mind, his mouth, and his fist. And when he faced an opponent too big, because he got jobs, I pointed this out before, he was a doorman for a Chinese American nightclub. And his job then was to, maintain peace in the nightclub. He was a doorman, but his real job was as a bouncer. And he was a longshoreman. He didn't need the money. My sister told me that the reason he took that job is he got legal license to kick the behinds of whites who are acting wrong and not go to jail for it. Because my father, one of his fears was jail. He didn't have no fear of white people, So my father fought with his fist. His generation was in a position where there are no movements that could give them the wind behind their back. So this is a key thing that you need to get straight. And I'm clear on myself. Whatever I've been able to do, whatever Stokely Carmichael, whatever the Black Panther Party, whatever Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SCLC, CORE, RAM, Revolutionary Action Movement, whatever the Deacons for Self-Defense could do, and whatever victories we could achieve, the major reason is that power in the world shifted. My father would have been a part of or leading one of these movements had he come along during my time. But because World War II bled Europe to death after 2 world wars and put them into decline, and America rose as the preeminent power, but only lasted for 27 years. They blew their power in 27 years. It was blown by the behinds being kicked by Mao Zedong in North Korea. He ran them across the 38th parallel. They went into decline because Ho Chi Minh and the liberation forces in Vietnam kicked their behind. They went into decline because they were stupid enough to go into Iraq and Afghanistan and attempt to wage war, and nobody wins in Afghanistan. The people fight and the geography kills you. Got defeated there and then waged a war against the people that hadn't dropped any bombs on them, Iraq, and got their butts whipped again. So in 27 short years, whereas the British had power for 300, America's gone down in 27 years. And you run around here talking about white supremacy. I don't use the term. It's in decline. Call it white savagery. It was that, but they came up with that term. We're always defining them by their term. Use what appropriately fits them. White savagery, white barbarism. And that's why a Trump could get into office, because whites are under this new pressure. The decline of America, the rise of Asia, and soon the rise of Africa, and the demographic shift inside this country away from whites to black, brown, red, and yellow. And you are always, I hear every black person I talk to about this will say, yeah, that don't mean nothing. What are you talking about? It doesn't mean anything. Do you think that if only a handful of white people came into this country, they'd have been able to take the whole country? No, they kept flooding it with white people. And then they executed genocide against the Native Americans. The shift in numbers is reflective of other shifts that will occur after that. So be clear about this. Our ability to produce victories in this country, especially, but in the world in general, in Africa, in the Caribbean, wherever we are in the world, for Asians in Asia, Cuba, this little island right off from Florida, it's due to the fact that the West is in decline and we're on the rise. And the victories we've chalked up are first of all due to that it has given us space to move in a way that we couldn't have moved before. In the case of the Southern Black Freedom Movement, it was able to chalk up victories against Southern style apartheid because of the organization and leadership of Black people, the masses of Black people going into motion, but especially because America is at that time in 54 and 1960 is a preeminent world power. They didn't want to be embarrassed by their own savagery. So some of it they had to lighten up on, but also because with this shift in power shifts occurred inside this country. And those power shifts were not just political, they were psychological. King observed it. He said that in the Montgomery bus boycott, a new Negro was coming into being. Garvey said the same thing with the Garvey movement. That means a Black person who wasn't in fear of white people. Oswald Spengler, one of the great Western historians who wrote the book, Decline of the West, Man of the Technique, An Hour of Decision. He made this comment in Man of the Techniques. And he was talking then in the 30s. And he was in some ways prophetic. He said, when Blacks and people of color look at the white man now, they don't look at him, they look beyond him. They see a new world. And he said, and the West is going down. That's why I wrote in a book, 2 volumes called Decline of the West, because he said the techniques, which is basically the tools of violence, gunpowder, that produced Gatling guns and other kinds of weapons. A Gatling gun was the old machine gun, and then naval warfare, and then later air warfare. He said the techniques are now shifting into the hands of people of color. The Russo-Japanese War, the beginning of the 20th century, was the first time in which people of color defeated through mechanized military, a mechanized military. That is, the Japanese naval forces defeated the Russian Navy inside of 17 minutes. So this is the nature of the power shifts that's going on in the world today. I see Wolf Manlu, he says, why is China mining the biggest cache of gold ever seen by today's eyes in Uganda? Because the leaders let them. It's not the people who are, and those same leaders are oppressing their own people. You know, the leader of Uganda is no good, you know. So until we have some systems where we have the power to run them ourselves, then that's where we've got problems, you know. So, so for me, you're not going to hear any whining, moaning, and groaning. Oh, whoa, the white man did this, the white man did that. When they came after me, this finger ended up in this shape. 18 guys trying to kill me. Well, you should have saw what I did to them. So I shed a little blood, but it's mainly, I've been in victorious movements. So I don't have a reason to be moaning and groaning. So our job is to make our enemies whine and groan. And you do that, you put a smile on your face when you're engaged in struggles for liberation that achieve victories. And that's the key thing. That's the key thing. You're not just struggling to struggle. You're struggling for the purpose of improving the lives of you and your people. And victory is key in that. Losing is not a good thing. If you do, you learn from it. So a key thing about the shift of the mindset of people of color and African people in the world today is that as you chalk up victories, then you begin to adopt a victorious thought pattern. You think in a winning way, but that's also how you thought even before you had your victories. That's the key to that. Because in life, as you think, so you are. And if you think you're powerless, you'll behave that way. And if you know better, you'll behave differently. So winning movements transform mindsets. It creates a powerful mindset. The greatest classrooms in struggle are your enemy and your people. The battlefield is the greatest classroom. It's better than all the books you read, but it will cause you to read books because you'll find out your weaknesses and you'll have to work on them. And you'll find out the strengths and weaknesses of your enemy and you'll have to work on them. You learn from your people, but you also learn from your enemy. You hear me? Study them. One of the keys to strategy is know yourself, know your enemy. And as Cabral said, the greatest enemy of a people engaged in struggle is their own weaknesses. Know your weaknesses and work on them. We're all going to have them. But if you're working on them, it's going to be hard for your enemy to run through you like a Mack truck. You hear me? So self-cultivation, that's key. Two shows that I did on the Haitian Revolution and Toussaint Louverture, and Toussaint is not my first hero, Dessalines is, I pointed out, but didn't really point out enough, Toussaint was always working on himself. He was a great voodoo master. He communicated with the good spirits the way George Washington Carver did, except he was in a spirit system created by Africans. He was drawing from his own spirit, So his self-cultivation, working on being a better human being, was key to his victories. And by the way, this is not what you're going to get in the West. You hear me? You're not going to get this in the West. And in fact, Western revolutions, they care less about transforming a human being. They're just concerned about the material power. And when they get into power, they often behave just like the oppressors that they replace. So the classroom of the community, the battlefield classroom is the best classroom because as you're in motion and you're engaged in struggle, you learn lessons about your enemy. You learn lessons about yourself. And for example, my first discovery of the issue of class in Black communities came through struggle and seeing how certain Blacks who had a certain kind of education, if they weren't dedicated to their people, placed their interests before the people's. And we see in Africa, the class issue is key to why Africa is being run into the ground because the people running these states have been Western educated, and with the exception of a few of Cabral and Nkrumah and Nyerere and a few others, they are serving their own interests and lining their own pockets. And that's an extension of their training But you can't blame it all on the training. It's also just a plain greed and the plain will to power of them wanting to dominate and to control. And it's putting Africa in a bad shape. Now, I'm not blaming it all on them. There's the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, there's the US, there's all of these corporations. They are behind this. So I ain't putting it all on a person being responsible, but this is key. So when you're engaged in a struggle, one of the things you learn is the nature of your power. And so one of the things that I learned, and a lot of others learned, was the power of Black folks when they start motion in the ocean of generating waves among other people. In this case, people of color and white youth. And as you move, you often encourage them to move. But it's only when you engaged in struggle or if you're a serious student. Malcolm observed this when he was not engaged in struggle because he was a student of history. And in this particular case was learning from the Black Freedom Movement and was learning from the students. And he was asking us for direction, just as we were getting direction from him. The leadership meeting that I was in with Malcolm for 3 hours, that was him engaging in an exchange. Because while Malcolm was not a good listener personally, publicly he was. And so he was there trying to draw from the currents of activism. And little did he know, when he met with us in 1963, he was meeting with the leaders of the baddest movement in the North, then or now. And most of you don't even know it. And it's not because I let it. I give credit where credit's due. Whoever is doing the best, I'm going to say so. He didn't know it then. We didn't either, because we're at the start of this movement, 63. Been gone from 60 to 65, but 63 is when we took on the big issues. So winning movements put other people in motion. Remember what the Minister of Culture said of the Black Panther Party, Emory Douglas. And this shows you just how deep your influence is. I repeated this last week. The Native American movement, American Indian movement, AIM, said that they were inspired to organize by the Black Panther Party. That's your power to put other people into motion. The free speech movement, which was the premier movement where white students tried to take over your university campuses in support of the Black Freedom Movement and to empower them to run universities, that came from the San Francisco Freedom Movement. We radicalized them after a year, throwing them in jail for various demonstrations. They went back and fought for free speech. They say so. Your power puts other forces in motion. In fact, your power is the leading force for change in this country, and most of you don't even know it. And so when you have victories, you don't even know what the basis for the victory was. The people in Black Lives Matter did. Give them credit. And Melina Abdullah, who was one of the best organizers in Black Lives Matter, she was out at Berkeley High School when I was pushing African-centered education in the public schools, but she was being educated by a brother named Richard Navies, who had the only Black Studies department in a high school in the United States. And she says that radicalized her. And she was leading demonstrations in LA of 100,000 people. You're going to dismiss this? Please, please. It'll do a lot of good for your psychological health when you're able to realize that you got power. It's just a question of how you use it, how you exercise it. What are the conditions under which you can achieve victory? You understand? And this applies also to your personal life, because you can apply this to your personal life. The best winning strategy for you personally is one, to free your mind, because then you take yourself out of the stress and the woe is me and seeing yourself through somebody else's eyes. And it really gets you to deeply love yourself. And then when you love yourself, you'll love your whole self. And so one of the things you'll do is you'll work on that physical health. So you don't have to be a high blood pressure statistics. I have friends who take high blood pressure as normal. Diabetes is normal because everybody they know got it. That ain't normal. Eating all that wrong food, you know what I mean? Ain't exercising. A plate that's as big as the Empire State Building. And then you're saying that they say to me, well, brother, you the only healthy brother. I know, really, give me a break. Health is in your mind, but we'll talk about health before wealth, but we don't pay any attention to it. So one of the first strategies is address your health. I've told you before, I have a strategy for living past 100. I'll be 83 next Thursday, August the 4th. And I have no ailments, no pains, no high blood pressure. As I said before, as a strategist and organizer, I delegate strokes, heart attacks, and high blood pressure to my enemies. I put pressure on them. They ain't putting no pressure on me. I love a fight because I'm telling you, you're going to lose. You hear me? So this doesn't just apply to the battlefield. This applies to life. You hear me? Work on yourself. Get yourself into a comfort zone. Understand you're under oppression. Don't escape from it. But at the same time, if you've got a free mind, you'll be free wherever you go. And you'll be prepared to handle whatever comes your way. So all movements, and I'm going to be talking about winning movements here, but not all movements are winning movements. So how do we deal with that one? So I've never lost a battle, okay? Now, let me qualify that. I've never lost a battle, but at the same time, I know that I could lose the next one. And so I get very humble when I get into a battle mode, a fighting mode. And I don't go on, oh, I've always won, I'm going to win. Because it's this next enemy that can take you out. And I've said to you before that the weakest enemies have sometimes been the most difficult ones to defeat. And so I'm not underestimating that. And when it comes to a physical thing, because I've never had to do much fighting, the little guy can be the one that can be the roughest one. You just never know. You know what I mean? And that's been part of America's problem. Big, bad America. They got the bombs. They got the tanks. They got all the rest of this stuff. And these little Vietnamese people, as Malcolm said, with a little pack of rice, a knife, and of course, Malcolm knew it was more than a knife, a gun, and strategy, they kicked their behinds. You hear me? So don't assume that even when you're victorious, it's a guarantee that you will continue to be. Because remember, old Muhammad Ali, he got into a fight with Leon Spinks. Spinks was so poor he didn't have teeth for his fight. Gaps all in his teeth and everything, but he was a heavyweight. You know what a heavyweight means? A professional boxer. If he clips you right, you can see daylight. And that's what happened to Muhammad Ali. But why did he get whipped? Because he didn't train for the fight. He underestimated his opponent. And old Leon Spinks got his moment of glory. Boom! And Muhammad Ali was out like a light. Good thing about him is he came forward and owned up. I underestimated him. He was a ladies' man. He was playing around. He was doing a whole lot of stuff boxer ain't supposed to be doing in training. You know what I mean? He trained and got his title back. You know what I mean? So my point is this. So strategy is the art of winning, but sometimes you lose. And if you do, then observe the principle that a fall in the pit leads to motherwit. It doesn't for everybody. Some people fall in the pit so many times in life that you wonder if they're ever going to get up. You hear me? But it's usually the condition for learning some lessons. So every strategy ain't perfect. Every battle isn't won. So in the case of King, he had a failure in Albany, Georgia. And that failure led his staff to get together and assess his weaknesses and to come up with his second most winning strategy and his second most important victory, which was in Birmingham. Operation Confrontation. And what did he get out of that? Civil rights legislation. See, people put King down. His movement produced the change in terms of legislation. SNCC and CORE, we were in the South, and so we contributed to that. But they had a certain thing that enabled them to get that change. But it came after falling, after making a mistake. Now, when he achieves this victory in Birmingham, this is one of the things that the new right wing holds up as an example of defeat for them. They see the Black freedom movement as the time in which they go down. They see it as a time of weakness and defeat. But many of us, particularly the radical Blacks in the 60s, a lot of them were putting down these movements. And they're running their mouth talking about nation time and Black power and everything else. And that's fine. But where was their victories? What movements had they organized? What power had they built? So you talk Black power, but where's the power? The power was there. You hear me? And it was there because there was an appropriate strategy. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. So the right wing realizes that the Black freedom movement imposed their first defeat in the history of this country. Their first defeat. And they even organized in reaction to it. So we had Black power, they got white power, you know. They started forming groups that were using the opposite language of the Black freedom movement, you know. And talking about reverse discrimination, as if you can discriminate in reverse, you know what I mean? As if we've had the power to, or the willingness to, you know what I mean? So we have often underestimated our own strengths because that is our big weakness. And it's an expression of self-hatred because we're putting down the people who are doing the best work. Calling King a Tom. In fact, when we met with Malcolm, that was one of the issues. It wasn't so much calling King a Tom as unjustified criticism coming from him and the Nation of Islam. When we were kicking behinds and when pinstripe wearing, bow tie suited Muslims were getting the jobs, we were busting open. And they're up there criticizing us. You know what I mean? We jacked Malcolm up on that. You hear me? And Malcolm had to back off and say the messenger would be announcing a political action program soon. We didn't know he was pushing the messenger in that direction. But a few months later, he was kicked out of the Nation, put on suspension, and then kicked out. But he had been trying to get the Nation to take a stand on the Black freedom movement. And we didn't know that at the time. When you have these issues of self-confidence, when you're seeing yourself through somebody else's eyes, you have trouble seeing a victory, especially if it doesn't fit your definition of a victory. Because some of us, it's Hollywood, or it's, armies engaging in armies. And so in the end, after millions of people die, you come up victorious. So that's a victory. But you can't see being able to tear down a system that was put in place since 1876, new segregation, new slavery, where whites were slave masters of Black people in general, breaking through that as a victory. You got to be blind. You hear me? So if we're going to understand this whole thing of strategy, the ultimate art, the basis for victory in the Black liberation movement, we certainly need to understand what a victory is. And that is a part of being strategic. So a fall in the pit can lead to motherwit. So King learned from the Albany experience. Hannibal, the greatest warrior probably in the history of the world, who was Black, who came out of a place called Carthage, that is today Tunisia. There's actually a coin struck in Hannibal's image, struck by him. And it's in World's Great Men of Color. I didn't use it for this leaflet, but he's got curly African hair, and he's a warrior. Whites have said, that wasn't Hannibal. That was one of his soldiers. Since when do they strike a coin, which was a part of some of his victories that he had carried out in Rome? Well, you're going to put it up and put the stamp of just an everyday warrior on it. Not when you have the greatest warrior on the planet. That was Hannibal. You know what I mean? So for you, all of you got to say, was Hannibal black? Well, he came out of Africa. What else could he be? You know what I mean? So Hannibal's an example of how, what the holy heck? What is this date site? Hannibal's an example of how a setback can be turned into a victory. And so in the case of Hannibal, in the First Punic War, his father had been defeated by the Roman Navy. And so Hannibal was put in a position where in the Second Punic War, he could not engage in naval warfare. And so as a result, Hannibal had to shape a new strategy. So this is an example of how a fall in the pit can lead to some motherwit. And so what Hannibal ends up doing is he ends up coming up with an Alps strategy where he crossed the Alps. And as a result of that, Cinnabar, go to this site. Somebody's got a love chat thing up there and get it down on the chat. You hear me? Okay. So Hannibal takes an adverse situation and turns it into an asset. And so he takes the strategy of crossing the Alps with elephants and not losing an elephant. He lost a lot of people in crossing the Alps, but he didn't lose a single elephant. And then ends up on the shores of Rome carrying out war. So even though I'm into this strategy, the ultimate art, and always winning is a good thing, that isn't always going to happen. And so if that is the case, then learn from your mistakes and move forward. Pick yourself up, clean yourself up, and move forward. Now, movements are collectives of people. Usually, people who are in a movement join people. They're not just joining a movement. Some people join the movement for the cause. Most join it for the people who are in the cause. And so one of the rules for strategy, and this governs both the person and organizations, is as you think, so you are. If you love yourself, then that's what you're going to think. And if you assume leadership of a movement, or you're playing a role in it, whatever it is, but especially a key role, then your first concern is going to be to see that no harm comes to your people. You're going to do your best to see that that happens. And in my case, when I joined the San Francisco Freedom Movement in 1960, I didn't come in with any ambitions to lead anything. The whole purpose was to support my people and to be of help. But when I was called on to assume leadership, I had already made a promise to myself. No one would be hurt by me doing anything egotistical or stupid. That my first concern was to see that my people came out whole, and whatever campaign people were involved in, I'm in it. So if they're demonstrating, I'm doing that. They're going to jail. By the way, the movement that I led, only one person was ever arrested because I had strategy. But if that was going to happen, I was arrested 16 times in the San Francisco Freedom Movement. That was supporting other campaigns. And then 2 times, one in Mississippi and one in Selma, at King's Selma to Montgomery March. But generally, I had strategy. It wasn't putting people in jail. King's strategy was jail. It had to be, because his method was different. We didn't copy King. That's the first thing you got to get straight in a movement is you can't export movements. So movements have particular characteristics, and so you got to be creative enough to figure out what they are. Here's another one. The more complex the environment you're in, the more complex the strategies that you're going to be called on to use. And you've got to master your environment. And so the environment can help you in terms of raising your game. But if you don't raise your game, it can overwhelm you. So the environment that the San Francisco Freedom Movement operated under was the second most complex environment for a freedom movement in the 60s. New York was the most complex. The seat of capitalism, the biggest police department around, all kinds of police who could speak different languages so they could spy on different groups. When Malcolm was assassinated, BOSS, which was their Bureau of Intelligence, was playing part of the role in orchestrating that. And Gene Roberts, who was a security person for him, was working for BOSS. He was the one that administered mouth-to-mouth recitation while he was a part of laying out the strategy to kill him. You know what I mean? So New York was a complex environment. You had Africans from Africa, you had Africans from the Caribbean, you have Africans from the South and from various parts of the North, and then you have all these other ethnic groups of white people and whatnot. And then the people who run the country and run the world, corporate America. That's the headquarters of it. Garvey organized there. And he got busted because of J. Edgar Hoover manipulating the district attorney of New York, getting him to file certain charges on Garvey, using the mails to defraud, a way to get him out of the country permanently, because then he couldn't get citizenship, which is something he was fighting for. So Garvey was going up against a complex environment, plus he was going up against the whole white world, the British, the French, all of them, the Americans, they were all on his tail, So that's a rough, tough environment. And I'm not saying, because in that environment, the Black Freedom Movement, we had CORE, and CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, had chapters in many parts of New York. New York's a hard environment to master. So I'm not faulting New York CORE for not mastering it. In fact, we had some good chapters, and one of them was Brooklyn CORE. Bad chapter. G2 Weusi was trained by Brooklyn CORE, ended up with a group called the East. One of my buddies, I introduced him to his second wife. And he was a part of Ocean Hill-Brownsville, which was the movement to control the public schools in Ocean Hill-Brownsville. He was a teacher and an organizer. And he said, no CORE, no Ocean Hill-Brownsville. So CORE equipped organizers with some real skills. But New York was the most complex environment you'd work out of. King, and particularly SNCC and CORE, they were working out of the roughest environment, which is King, the South, but CORE and SNCC, Mississippi. You want to talk about rough? It wasn't complex. Ain't nothing complex about it. It was just deadly. And so that's key to the success of the Southern movement. they were able to produce victories under savagery and barbarism, where every day you thought it was your last day. That's what King would say. So give them credit. The biggest victories in the movement were scored in the South. They got put down by radical blacks. The same radical blacks that didn't take their radical behinds down South and face some of those. And in one group, when they did, at the first sign that their leader was going to be attacked by the Klan, they smuggled him out of the South, but they didn't smuggle Amzie Moore out of the South, who was a major leader in the Mississippi movement, the regional council of Negro leadership in the 50s, and was a major force on SNCC and was a friend of Ella Baker's. They stayed put. You hear me? So the reality of the environment plays a big part in what you have to deal with. You have to respond to that environment. Now, the San Francisco Freedom Movement was the most effective movement in the North. It was the only successful one in the North. And that was both a freedom movement and a Black Power movement. We led the Black nationalist wing within CORE. A year before Black Power, we had laid out proposals for restructuring the Black movement. It wasn't around a slogan, it was around program, Black community financing the movement and so forth. One of the keys to our success, as I pointed out before, is the ego thing. Burying our ego. It wasn't just me, it was the group that did that. And Will Ussery, who you're going to see on our show on the 20th and the 27th, who was chair of CORE before me, he's 93 going on 94 and in great shape. He made this comment about one of the keys to the success of our movement. He said, and I'm quoting him, he said, "When we made a move, we made the best decision and we put the best person in charge." That meant that it wasn't an ego thing. So there were certain decisions we made where Will or I, by all rights, should have led that. And we were the best qualified to do it too. But we didn't put ourselves in there because someone else was better for the community. Someone else would rally more people. And this someone else who happened to be a brother named Dr. Nathaniel Burbridge, head of the NAACP, one of 4 militant NAACP leaders in the 60s, a radical in his own right, had 2 PhDs, one in pharmacology and one in medicine. He was the one that Blacks had the most respect for, his age, his degrees, and for us, his commitment. He didn't compromise. You know what I mean? Now, strategy is the ultimate art. It's the basis for victory in Black liberation movements. And there are 2 key principles that are key in fighting to win and in victory. One is fight only for a just cause. 2, only fight if you can win. Don't fight to fight. If you're in the streets and you see some guy that's coming up that you know is going to whip you, don't engage in a fight. Get the hell out of there. Martial artists, we're trained in that. Even if we think we can win, the first rule is to get out, because you don't know what's going to happen in a fight. Someone can be killed, you know? So this ain't like the movies, you know? So those 2 things are key. Now, one of the questions is, how do you know if you have a winning strategy? Well, sometimes it's pretty obvious. But in other cases, when it's complex, only a strategist is going to know. And by the way, I don't think it's advisable to democratize strategy. You democratize whatever a campaign is, whatever you decided on, if whatever the campaign you're fighting for, if it's economics, if it's politics, if it's family reorganization, it's community revitalization. But when it comes to strategy, leave that to the people who are good at that. And if you go voting on it because you don't like something or this or that, then you end up in trouble. You know what I mean? So my policy in the San Francisco Freedom Movement, I made this point before, and I think this is key to movements in general, was to minimize mistakes, consensus rule when it came to policy. And there was no such thing as democratic centralism and all this stuff, which is what the left uses. And that usually means one person in control or a few people in control. My view was when you put every idea in the pot, what will come out is the best. And so when you had a meeting or something, which I was chairing, it was like a big band. Everybody gets to speak. Everybody puts their ideas in the pot. Usually it's around a decision that our committees have recommended. That's how campaigns work with us. So in this case, it was the Economic Committee headed by a brother named Ortho Drew, who worked for the United Airlines. You know, he was in charge of that. So when his committee came up with targets, campaigns, which was the economic power structure, then the debate was, were we going to do it or were we not? Strategy was left to me because that's my gift. And if it wasn't my gift, it would be somebody else. There's no ego here. And there were times where the strategy was so delicate that I got the group's agreement by vote to let me shape a strategy that wouldn't be discussed. They wouldn't know squat about it. Because if our enemy, which in that case happened to be the biggest bank in the world, the Bank of America, knew, they would be able to undermine the strategy. The only time I did that. But in all cases, in successful campaigns, you need strategists. And if you haven't got a good strategist, woe unto you. You're in trouble. So this is key. One is a just cause and having a winning strategy. Now, a good strategist wins at the planning table. When they hit the battlefield, the battle is generally won. That isn't always the case because things change. And so some things that you thought were one way can change another. But generally, if you got good strategy, that's what happened. If America, and fortunately, they've made all of these mistakes and their power is going down. What makes them sad, as Malcolm said, makes me glad. I'm glad that they've run through their power in 27 years. You're not going to see me weeping. Where are we benefiting from this? Where are the oppressed anywhere in the world benefiting from this? Bad strategy. Bad. I don't even know if Trump could spell strategy. Harry Truman, who put you on the Cold War basis and the national security state, he didn't know up from down, but he's been given a pass in history, turned into a great president. There was a reason why when he went out of office, he had one of the lowest approval ratings in history because he didn't know what up was from down. You understand? And so he approved of some stuff, especially the national security state, that has put America into the doldrums. There's all this money going into the military budget. China is building up their economy, taking 400 million people out of poverty. They're incrementally building their military because they're no fools. I'm no pro-Chinese, by the way. I'm just telling you what's good strategy. This country's driving people into poverty, making fewer people rich and the rest poor. That isn't only bad strategy, that's a recipe for disaster. So the winning strategy is based on a number of things. And one of the things for me is because strategy is the ultimate art. It comes after God, it comes after love, and it comes after truth. Those are the most important things. And then after that, strategy is the ultimate art. It's an aesthetic art. Aesthetics means an art of great beauty when it's exercised by masters. In fact, I would say this, because I think that God's greatest creation, of course, is the cosmos, Mother Nature, you know. But then I think woman is God's greatest creation. Among all the creatures God has created. And then I think, because I'm black, I think the black woman is the finest thing going, especially when she's got inner beauty. Looks ain't the main thing, but she's got this thing about her. As beautiful as the black woman is, strategy, when executed, is an art of beauty beyond description. And when it's executed by masters, only the master is going to see it. You won't if you don't exercise this art, if you don't know this art. That's the subtlety of it. So for me, when I'm formulating a strategy, and there are two types. The first is the strategy where you win without fighting. That's the perfect strategy. And the majority of my battles have been based on that. Winning battles for jobs and other kinds of battles without a fight. Grabbing city budgets for years, millions of dollars without a fight, and putting it in the hands of the black community. I've never taken a dime for any campaign I've led. Those are the best fights. So a perfect strategy is when you capture the mind of your enemy. Instead of dropping bombs on them or mortar on them, capturing a city without storming it. That's a perfect strategy. Why? Because the law of the cosmos is the law of Ma'at, harmony, truth, justice, balance, and right order. So for a strategy to be supreme, it has to be a strategy that is executed without force, without effort. You're not going to know what this means. I'm just going to say it. The reason why a strategy can be won without a fight is policy. I'm just going to say that. When I was younger, I knew how to do it, couldn't explain it. When I got older, I knew how to do it and could explain it. And so when I saw a big enemy fall, and I'm just sitting right next watching it, now that was pure pleasure. I don't really get pleasure out of victory. But this one was in the sense that I knew the rules for this. So this is real key. And so you have a lot of situations where you can win without a fight. But there are situations where you cannot. And so if you are in the situation where you can't win without a fight, and there are certain preconditions for it, I can't go into it right here, then you win by attacking your enemy's weaknesses and avoiding his strengths. This is real key. And a lot of our Black liberation movements have made the mistake of attacking the enemy at the point of his strengths. And notice one of his big strengths is force and violence. That's a strength that you don't want to take on head on. And you want to exercise it subtly. And the key thing about that strength is you want to use it in a way that you can protect your lives, your families, your communities, and the institutions you build. And so you got to be strategic about how you exercise that. But if you're going out trying to engage the big bad wolf who's got more everything than you got some M16s and whatever, you know what I mean? That's good for defensive purposes only. So attack your enemy's weakness, avoid their strengths. And the best policy for keeping people alive in a campaign are best policies. And those best policies keep people free of a lot of attacks that would otherwise occur. So war is an aberration of Ma'at, or it goes contrary to the laws of Ma'at. And so when you see wars going on the planet, it's a failure of policy. What you're seeing right now in Ukraine is pure stupidity. Good strategy in Ukraine would have been for the Ukrainians to cut a deal with the Russians and the West. That's the United States. Instead of playing all these games around being in the West when the West don't want you anyway, being in the European Union when now they say they're going to consider them, they don't want them. It's a corrupt government. There's not much that they're going to get from it. And put them in NATO, it's the last thing they plan to do. So leadership in Ukraine, if it had any sense, it would have cut a deal. And the Russians were prepared for it. In fact, the Russians offered it. And I'm not on the side of Russia. Russia's wrong in what it's doing. So don't misread this one. But there was a point where Ukraine needed aid. They've always needed aid. And Putin had offered to give half and suggested the West give the other half. That was a part of cutting a deal, neutralizing them. And of course, he would want commitments that they're not going into NATO or the European Union. And the US said no, and in fact helped to overthrow a government there. McCain was up there supporting that, you know? And so they put themselves into the soup. And so as a result, America is pumping all these billions of dollars in there. And in the end, Russia is going to take this thing and move on it. Ogawa, call Cinnabar and tell him to get back on this site here. So this was the key thing there. So strategy, a lot of that has to do avoiding something that you're going to lose and pursuing policies that will put you in a better position. And that is key to any winning strategy. And that doesn't always look bad and bold. Cinnabar, get back in there. They're back up on the site. Now, so when we deal with strategy, there are some key things that are extremely important. In my last show, or one of my shows, I've referred briefly to an observation made by one of our best thinkers, a revolutionary thinker by the name of James Boggs. James Boggs was an automobile worker, had a high school education, and he was a brilliant intellectual, wrote a number of books, and his thoughts and observations on our movement were deep. Here, his work was being done in conjunction with his wife, who was Grace Lee Boggs. And Grace Lee Boggs was a Chinese-American revolutionary, PhD from an Ivy League college called Bryn Mawr. So Boggs had some brilliant observations about the Black Freedom Movement, and one of them caused me to do some further reflection and assessment, and it had to do with strategy. And he made the observation that King's success in the Black Freedom Movement, he basically said the Southern movement's success in achieving victory was due to the fact that they had a successful methodology. By that, he meant strategy. This was insightful because most revolutionaries weren't paying attention to King that much, let alone see them as executing brilliant strategy. So he went on to say, but the Northern movement had failed to produce significant across the board change, and therefore significant across the board victories, because it had failed to develop a successful winning methodology or successful winning strategy. King made the same observation. When I read that, I said, yeah, you're right. And then it helped me to better put what we had achieved in the San Francisco movement into perspective, because then I also said, after I thought about it for a minute, yeah, you're right, except for the San Francisco freedom movement. We developed a winning methodology. And that's what this is all about. Strategy, the ultimate art, the basis for victory in the Black liberation movement. We got victories both in the Black freedom and Black power movement. We led the Black power wing, or the Black nationalist wing, within CORE. And so it was both. We were wielding real power all along to begin with, and successful power. This movement occurred between 1960 and 1965. And the high point of it was 1963 to 65. Note 65 is when the Black freedom movement in the South achieved its objectives. And that happened to be the time when that happened in the San Francisco freedom movement. And by San Francisco freedom movement, I'm referring to San Francisco, the Bay Area, and in certain campaigns, the state of California, which is the biggest state in the United States. This movement was successful because it developed not a successful strategy, which is what King developed. His Selma and Birmingham campaigns were based on the same strategy. His campaign in Montgomery was based on the boycott. But basically, the other two, it was the same strategy. And it worked. But in our case, to win victory, we need multiple strategies suited to each situation. So the key thing about the San Francisco freedom movement is that we succeeded in doing something the Northern movement didn't do. The Southern movement did it automatically. It was obvious. They identified the issue that Black people wanted, addressed, and that was segregation and the right to vote. That's what they addressed. But the Northern movement was scattered in what it did, both Black freedom and Black power. It was scattered. It identified issues like housing, education, employment, police violence, these issues, but it had no idea of focus. And you can't have a winning strategy if you're all over the place. So when King moved into the North, he was bouncing between these issues. Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee tried to set up a base in the North in Philadelphia, never was able to. And it had the same attitudes. They were identifying all of these issues. You can't attack all those issues. And all of those issues are not winnable. The police is not a winnable issue. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't take on the police. But if that is your main focus, well, good luck. Because the police are here to stay as long as this oppressive system is there. So fight them, but that shouldn't be your main arena. And I hope Black Lives Matter is learning that now. For Black Lives Matter, it's a focal point where people are aroused and get angry and move into the streets and produce some other changes, and one of which was getting Trump out of the White House. And on the local level, there has been some mitigation against police violence. You don't hear about it in the press. So they're having some victories on the local level. But that's a dead-end issue if that's all you're focused on, because the police is only going to continue to be beefed up against you as this system becomes more oppressive. So you got to identify the issues. They're going to address people directly. And so we went to the people. They told us what the issue was. We didn't go on our own. Jobs, baby. And now I would say jobs and economic development. But at that time, they didn't say economic development. We had businesses, maybe not enough, but a huge number of them. But the businesses were getting short in terms of support because a lot of Black people didn't have the jobs. This was post-World War II, and Blacks had largely lost the World War II manufacturing jobs that gave us good employment. My family got a home based on what they were able to get during World War II. Though my father had the kind of job on the waterfront, he could have done it afterwards. But most Black people, that was the case. So we identified the key issue. That was the first point. And then we developed the winning strategies for producing victory. Now, the key thing is this. The victories of the San Francisco's freedom movement, Black freedom movement, led by CORE, was against the entire economic power structure. We defeated the entire economic power structure, industry by industry, using different strategies for each industry. Banking industry, hotel and restaurant industry, downtown department stores, supermarkets, you name it, bottling companies, a whole bunch of them. In 1 year, we reached 270 job agreements with industries and then another 360. And most of those were enforced. A lot of those victories came without a fight, but the ones where we had a fight, there was an appropriate strategy for each situation. Strategies that would put businesses out of business if, they didn't give in. And sometimes the strategy we started with didn't work. So we tried another. And that was, again, me improvising on the spot. But it was always something that would knock you out. And so this was the key to the Black freedom movement. And today, Black families have been weakened by the jobs leaving the country and the low-paying jobs being the ones that are still here. And so today, Black youth especially need good-paying jobs, along with capital for economic development to build their own businesses. But the key thing is the main reason for the erosion of the Black family from 75% two-parent households, 68 to 29% today is no finance, no romance. The money has gone out of people's pocketbooks. If they're working on these service jobs that pay very little. So in revitalizing our community, the job campaign is crucial, and economic development has to be central to that. One of the achievements of the Black freedom movement in San Francisco is organizing a total community, block by block organizing. Today, a lot of Black communities have been fractured. And so you're not going to be able to do wholesale block organizing. But in other Black communities like Ferguson or Chicago, there's a whole bunch of Black communities where you have compact areas in which Black people live. That's a basis for organizing. And in fact, I think SNCC would have done much better in Mississippi to use that model in Mississippi, where this almost a majority in the state are Black, So our success was based on the strategies that suited the situation. And those strategies produce well-being for the Black community. I should point out, those jobs that we produced then are still available now. And none of our members profited from it. And it occurred in a complex demographic environment. We also used alliances and coalitions, having the second most complex community in the country, the largest Chinese American community, the only Japanese American community, a large Latino community, and 100,000 Blacks, which was not a large Black community, but a strategically located, militant, and conscious Black community in the Fillmore. And so that enabled us to form alliances and coalitions to get certain things. So we did the first takeover of the War on Poverty program under my leadership. People consider that handkerchief head. Yeah, really? We put millions of dollars in the Fillmore, and I put a guy named Will Ussery in charge, and he executed a block-by-block organizing program 45,000 black people. That's never been done in the country. Had that been done in Chicago when Harold Washington was mayor, blacks would still be running City Hall in Chicago. And had the Black Panther Party done that, they could have buried the FBI and everybody else in a sea of organized people. And if their leadership got knocked off, then they'd have other leadership to take their place and places to hide out and get out if necessary, while they kept the struggle going. So the San Francisco Freedom Movement provides a prototype for certain things we can do now. Other things are different, and we have to do those. So Chris Smalls, the move that he's made in Amazon, not only to defeat Amazon on the issue of unionizing Amazon, so you could get more wages, but he was real smart. I like this brother. He organized him a black union. Of course, it's a union, but the majority of the people in there are black. Now, I've heard the left talk about this, white left, and they say, oh, yeah, but this is complex, negotiating union contracts and blah, blah, blah. Well, where were the white union leaders when they were carrying out this campaign? They were up there in their big houses, eating a lot of food, enjoying their big salaries, and copping out. So I think that in terms of increasing the level of prosperity in the black communities of color, not only need jobs, they now have to be good paying and as much as possible union jobs. The best jobs we opened up was in the supermarkets. What'd you get? You got union pay, unionized. You got medical benefits and retirement benefits. And when I walk through Lucky's and Safeway throughout the Bay Area, I see nothing but black and brown and yellow people and whites, but it came through that movement. And so if you want to get gangsterism over in the black community, the easiest way to end gangsterism is for the gangster to get a good paying job. Now, some of them will still remain gangsters, but in most cases, they're going to leave that life because they don't want to be in it in the first place, and they'll tell it to you in a minute. So, of course, now with black communities being eroded through the powerful forces that have hit it since '68, culture has to be a key component, as it was then, of any programs that we put together. Our culture has to be key to that, because we got to change mindsets as we build power in our community. And with the rising right wing, we have to be really focused on community revitalization, family reorganization. And I said that I'm not going to get into the stuff that comes from God and strategy, but I am going to say this. And I think this is one of the keys to community revitalization, and it's this. And it's not only the key to revitalizing families and extended family communities and African and Caribbean nations, but it is the key for restructuring this society on the long-term basis. And that's the twin lineal family model. Go to the shows that have covered that. I've only hit the surface of it. But that's the model that created societies for a couple of 100,000 years, starting with the hunter-gatherer societies, where there were no jails, no oppression, no abuse of women, no abuse of children, no hunger. You hear me? Where people lived in balance, and where the meaning of being a woman boiled down to one word: equal. Equal. King was talking about restructuring America. So was Malcolm. That was their conclusion by the end of their life. I'm telling you, the twin lineal model is it. Now, there's other things you have to have, but that's the key. Male and females make up society. So if you have balance between those, that's the key. Now, in a society where racism still rules, demographic shifts are important, because as you bring your culture into the equation, then what you're going to be able to see is that you can get some just males and females, not just any males and females. So strategy is the ultimate art. Strategy is an art of great beauty. Strategy can be exercised by those who are seemingly weak, but like water, when they execute either a perfect strategy or a strategy aimed at an opponent's weaknesses, they overflow that opponent like water. And they say water has no enemies, but I'll tell you, when it's flood time, there's plenty of enemies coming from water. In this case, caused by global warming and stuff like that. And again, it's the balanced paradigm between males and females that's going to be the basis for balance in society between humans and Mother Nature, based on living in harmony with the cosmos, because we're living in harmony with each other. So strategy is an ultimate art. It's not only used by movements, but by individuals in your own life. Exercise it in your day-to-day living, and you do better. Put planning into what you do, and I know a lot of you do, but if you don't, plan ahead. So strategy is good for the short term, strategy is good for the long term. There's a lot more to this, but this is sufficient. As you can see, I light up on strategy. I light up on a lot of things, but strategy, strategy is the ultimate art. Work on it. If it's your gift, master it. If it isn't, appreciate it and encourage those that have it. Hotep. Okay, let's see. Brother Ogawa, question. The block by block organizing strategy sounds like what Hugo Chavez implemented in Venezuela. Do you know if he was inspired by Black Power movement in the U.S.? Probably not, because the Black Power movement in the U.S. wasn't using it. But it's a common strategy. The Cubans have used it. It's called the CDRs, Committees for the Defense of the Revolution. When I worked in the Ujamaa villages in Tanzania in 1973, they used it. The Vietnamese used it in their war for liberation against the Americans. It's just simply the best strategy. Ella Baker loved it, but she never used it, in part because the job she had, like being executive director of the NAACP, wouldn't permit it, because it was a top-down organization, people on the top making all the decisions. And in the case of SNCC, she was basically supporting SNCC in their drive to support everyday Black people to lead themselves. But I don't know. I don't know that she ever recommended this as a system for SNCC, but it would have been an outstanding system for them. The executive director of SNCC, James Foreman, I pointed this out before, when he traveled to Guinea, in the mid-60s, he observed how Sekou Touré, the president of Guinea, organized, and they had what they called the 10-10 system. And if you recall the conversation with Emory Douglas, he talked about the Panthers talking about the 10-10 system, but they never really implemented it. So it's used all over the world. And by the way, Denmark Vesey used it. And that was the best organized of the slave rebellions. Ed Donaldson, what's the name of the radical NAACP leader? His name was Dr. Nathaniel Burbridge, Burbridge. And he's the brother on the side of, no, this is the wrong one. Got the wrong book. He's the one on the opposite side of Toussaint, light complexion brother. And he's on the top of Fannie Lou Hamer. Dr. Nathaniel Burbridge, Burbridge. He ranks like this. He's on the level of Medgar Evers. He's on the level of Robert Williams that picked up the gun in North Carolina and then got ran out. He's on the level of Cecil Moore, who led the job demonstration of the NAACP in Philadelphia. Burbridge had 2 PhDs, one in pharmacology, one in medicine. First person to be tenured at UC San Francisco, University of California, San Francisco. He was a researcher on pharmacology, and he was so good, he was being considered for a Nobel Prize, but he put his full time in the movement. Burbridge set up the medical system for Indonesia and was loved by Sukarno. Sukarno was then the president of Indonesia and a good man. He's the one that called the Bandung Conference that brought together Africans and people of color to plot a course towards African independence. Malcolm often pushed the Bandung Conference. I pointed this out before, when he came to San Francisco, he asked to meet with Burbridge. Burbridge was a no-compromise, nice brother. He just didn't play. We put him in charge of the United Freedom Movement when it could have been me or Will Ussery. Will had the idea for the Black United Freedom Movement, which is a Black United Front, another prototype that came out of the movement. And I was leading the movement, leading most of the campaign. So either one of us had entitlement to chair that, but we picked Burbridge because he garnered more respect in the Black community and because we knew he would stick to his guns and would not sell out, and he would be supportive of whatever we did, so that was key there. Burbridge, Dr. Nathaniel Burbridge. Dreamchild is talking about the interruption of the messages. We'll block it. See if there's anything else. Wolf Manlu, the Ubuntu arts came from Kush. The physical fighting styles and philosophy are followed by many fighting styles today. Good point. So this is a response to Brother Dreamchild. TJ Jess Obi, Fighting for Honor, the history of African martial arts in the Atlantic world, the Carolina Low Country and Atlantic world. So Brother Dreamchild is citing some sources for Black martial arts. Wolf Manlu, a true knowledge or our story is tantamount to the education needed for Black people. Art of War was a good book, yet African spiritual knowledge such as Muntu arts was where that book drew from. Yeah, but the art of war is more than just fighting. The art of war is strategy. And in this case, you're referring to Sun Tzu, The Art of War. There are many issues of Sun Tzu's The Art of War. I don't have it right in front of me, but the best issue is written or translated by a Chinese scholar. And the others have been, some of them translated by, in one case, a American Marine Corps general. What they generally lack when you get translation of what they have to say is the Chinese philosophy. And when you get the version that's coming from a Chinese perspective, then you get the Chinese philosophy. Lao Tzu. Should The Art of War by Sun Tzu be added to the reading list as a reference book for the development of strategists within our community? Yes, but the stuff I was running down didn't come largely from him. So get that one straight. But yes, it's a master work. Another one from Lao Tzu. Have you read the book of 5 Rings on mastery and strategy? His contention is that those who master strategy see it in all practices. Yeah, I've read it. It's a Japanese approach. Not as profound as Sun Tzu, but yeah, it's okay. But we have to shape strategy based on our own conditions and circumstances. And what I was trying to do was do that. Militant Malcolm, never underestimate the little man. Short man, he's talking basically about the little man has some power. Don't underestimate him. And that also applies to people with what appears to be little power. Militant Malcolm, do you believe Amos Wilson or Khalid Muhammad were killed? They say both of them died of brain aneurysm. I know for a fact that Khalid Muhammad was not killed. I knew his girlfriend before the one that he was with when he died. He had high blood pressure, and as greatest shape as he appeared to be in, he's under a lot of stress for a lot of reasons. And he wasn't taking his medication. It was right after sex that imploded, and it took him out. And I don't know anything about Amos Wilson's death. I can't make any comment. Okay, Rafiq Wadi, please give me a private number to which we can talk. If what you've left there is a private number, I'll call you. Rafiq Wadi, let me know if this number you have right here is a private number. And if it is, I'll give you a call. I need to find here's my pen. I'll write this down. Let me see if there's any more here. I want to go back into Brother Dreamchild's Kamari's observation. They're using low intensity operations quite a bit right now against our contemporary activists. Yeah, and low intensity operations, I can't go into it today. I cover it in my volume 2 of the Art of Leadership, and I've trained for it and gone up against it, as I pointed out. Thing about low intensity operations is that it was shaped by the British. General Kitson, who was a brigadier general in the British Army, and he had successfully defeated the Malaysian independence movement in Malaysia, and he had defeated the Mau Mau movement in Kenya. He went up against the Irish Republican Army. He couldn't defeat them. And so he wrote this book on low intensity and peacekeeping operations, went to a university, took time off to write it. And he was writing it mainly for the American general staff in the midst of the Vietnam War. So it was a methodology for trying to knock off wars of national liberation. But it was also used in the United States to knock off Black liberation movements, and it was refined by Ronald Reagan when he became governor, and he had a high-ranking officer in the National Guard who was put over this. And then this particular strategy was put into FEMA, Federal Emergency Disaster Institute, the last place you'd expect it, and then used against various movements in this country. It's called low intensity because you can't see it, and it's designed to take a movement out when it's small, and it's designed to try and offset the deficiencies of COINTELPRO. So that's kind of the background. And it's always like people in the movements, they're always geared up to the last thing they did, not what they're doing right now. You need to do both. Ed Donaldson, it's interesting you say that about Malcolm. My roots are with NOI and BPP. Right on. See if there's anything else up here. We'll go down to the bottom. Let me go around and see what's happening down here. Oh, good. Hey, brother, Dream Child. He went and bought Kitson's book. Right on. The reference he's citing is chapter 16 in The Art of Leadership. And I made this observation. You may have picked it up. I got a book you cited and read it. Amilcar Cabral, The Life of a Reluctant Nationalist by Antonio Tomas. I had been stuck in my writing on a piece that I'm getting ready to write on Cabral, which is his Boloso or improvisational period. And this book helped to solve that question. So that was a big piece of help, brother. You got a bunch of good books up there. There are some others that I need to get that I haven't got yet, but that's one that I got. I'm trying to find that phone number here. See if I can find you here. Okay, let me write this one down. Okay, so yeah, that's one thing I enjoy about this show is we got some real informed people here. 9086. Okay. Okay, that appears to be it. Hope you all got something out of this. Use it for your benefit. And by the way, some of you all have contacts with different community organizations. Hook me up. Send me some stuff on these groups. Let me know what they're doing because I like to do some hookups because that's part of what this show is about. And I'll be on. Brother Ugawa has set me up for interview on Hapi, HAPI, which is a conscious program on YouTube. And I'll be interviewed this Thursday, 5 my time, 8 East Coast time. I don't know if that's a live interview. I suspect it's not, because that would be pretty late for East Coast people. But you can check out Hapi, HAPI, to see, and I'll let you know next week when it's coming on, if it doesn't come on live. So that's it. I see another new comment. Let me see what this is. Yeah, no, that's it. Okay, so Hotep, folks. Till next week. And don't forget, next week is going to be focusing for the next month on African American or New